President Obama's State of the Union address has dominated the headlines out of Washington this week. 24-hour News 8 political reporter Rick Albin was in D.C. for the speech and has just returned from the nation's capital.
And now, Rick, you had a chance to speak with nearly half of the state's congressional delegation. So just some of the questions here. What's the takeaway from last night's speech, and what kind of cooperation can we expect in the president's last 2 years?
Boy, you know, it's going to be tough to figure this out because there was a lot of skepticism going into this before the speech by a lot of Republicans. Afterwards, some were even less enthusiastic. Still, there's a recognition that to get anything done with a Republican Congress and a Democratic president, you're going to have to involve that elusive occurrence of bipartisanship. But the real question is about the disconnect between the way the two parties view the same issue and how that may get in the way.
Mr. Speaker!
The night began, like all the others in recent memory, a rousing ovation for a president who didn't take long to promise to veto any number of items, including significant changes to the Affordable Care Act, that majority Republicans might send to him.
I will veto it.
That played to the worst fears of some Republican members of the Michigan delegation.
It's not just about accepting the president's direction that he wants to go. I think we need to provide an alternative direction, and whether it's in health care, which we have done, but it's going to get more prominence now that we have both the House and the Senate.
We'd like to see policies that actually help regular Americans.
The political tensions that have been apparent for the last 6 years still exist, and no doubt extend to the president's call to level the playing field for the middle class, though Michigan's freshman U.S. Senator likes Mr. Obama's plan.
So certainly in his tax policies that he's already announced, he's looked at middle-class tax cuts, which I think makes sense, and middle-class families are the ones that are being squeezed.
I think tax increases and discouraging investment in America is the wrong direction. I think we want to free up capital and make sure that people invest in jobs and business.
Republicans like freshman Congressman John Molinar have a very different take than Democrat Gary Peters, who see a tax cut as a populist message, while Republicans see it as a tax increase on others. Still another freshman Republican House member, former Michigan Senate Majority Leader Mike Bishop, is looking for areas to find compromise, though clearly he remains skeptical.
So there are things that we can all work together on. I just hope that he doesn't put on the table political issues that operate as wedge issues.
Like raising taxes on some to pay for tax breaks for others. For Republicans, that would be a wedge issue, and highlights the disconnect between the two parties when you hear Michigan's senior senator talk about the promise that just such an action can hold.
It's important to note that 2 years ago, we really did see an important change, asking those at the very, very top, the wealthiest, to contribute a little bit more for the services they get as Americans. And we've actually lowered the yearly deficit by 2/3.
So in the end, are Republicans from Mars and Democrats from Venus? Well, when it comes to political rhetoric, it seems so. But perhaps when it all comes down to it, there may be some hope that the planets can find a similar orbit.
The only way you get things done is to work with the other side. And of course, right now, you got a Democratic president. So if you want to get a bill signed by the president, if it's purely partisan, it's never going to get there.
Likewise, the president's call for raising taxes on some to cut taxes on others is not realistically going to make it through the Republican-controlled House and Senate. So the question that we come away with is this: will both parties spend the next few months using their respective power bases to posture for the all-important presidential election in 2016, or will real governance break out? That is something we'll be covering, of course, not just now, but all the way through 2016. I got to tell you, when I got on the plane this morning, I was talking to a couple of folks, and they said, so what did you think of the speech last night? And I said, well, it's not so much the speech, it's what happens afterwards.
Right.
And so that's what we'll watch.
Well, and you know, definitely a bold speech, of course, because you have 7 veto threats right there. And you just have to wonder, is this, since it's his last term, he has nothing to lose, so he wants to just stay relevant, really?
Perhaps, and perhaps he's trying to set the table for that 2016 election, because if Democrats can seize on a populist message about the middle class being squeezed, we know wages haven't kept up, even though the economy has come back. Those wages for folks in the middle have certainly not kept up with the kind of raises we've seen at the top. And so if that becomes a popular message that they can put forward, if it's something that they can use going into the next election cycle for the U.S. Senate, which could be a real interesting race, the House may not be in play as much, but certainly that presidential race is something Republicans and Democrats are both very, very anxious to control.
Oh, yes. All right, Rick, thank you for that
You bet.
insight.
Thanks, Rick.